Afolabi Imokhuede is an education consultant to look at that marginal decline in the performance of candidates for that West African Examinations Council. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you.
Well, because time and again we focus on this. You were even at that education summit, which was organized, and everyone hopes that still looking to see what becomes of those recommendations in terms of how they implement them. But where do we start from now? Yes, he's talked about this marginal decline in the performance, and for now, that's where we'll pick it up from. Did you think that, okay, well, having had that summit, was it possible to have a direct effect on the next exam, so it would take some time?
Well, clearly, thank you for having me this morning. The summit was in March, and exams obviously were written in April, May, June, so there's no way the outcome of this summit this year would have had any effect in the results that we've seen just released a few days ago. So clearly, I think this decline, the past 3 years right now, should then get the government, it should be a wake-up call that we cannot afford to then sweep the summit and resolutions under the carpet, but they must be dealt with. Now, let me point out something, actually, because the reality, just like the spokesperson for WAEC had said, is the fact that the past 3 years, they've actually been a decline. In pulling it, he said in 2012 was 38.81 that passed. In 2013, 36.57 passed. And obviously this year it's 31.28. So you can see that there's been a decline the last 3 years. But what is worth noting actually though was if you look at it from 2004, it actually climbed. In 2004, the percentage passing rate was actually 18.26%. So you can see that I think we had a time of very terrible failure rate, and it climbed over the years. And so the reason why this should become another wake-up call is the climb that you had is obviously now beginning to reduce.
Okay, that's what you were talking about.
Yes.
The decline.
Yes. So it's yes, that's what it is. It's declined. But then if we look at it in relation to 10 years ago, 2004, we've had a climb. But it's important for us to underscore this now because your climb is now beginning to decline again.
So from 38.81% in
Yes.
2012, we've seen it drop almost all the way to 31.28%. We're looking at over 7%.
Exactly.
7% drop.
Yes.
in
and now that
figures.
7%, not just in relative terms, but understanding that each year the actual number of candidates sitting for the exams increase. So in terms of numbers, it's not just about 7%, it's actually about a larger number of people are failing. So that's why there needs to be that wake-up call. Now, if you ask me who takes responsibility, I think it's actually a societal failure. It's not one of this morning, it's not one of those things where we just cast all the blame on the government. It's actually a societal failure, in my opinion. I believe, and when I mean society, it's got to be the parents, the teachers, the government, which is the governance, obviously politics as well, and then of course then you bring in the students as well, who are also our own children, because it's a combination of all of these things that is resulting in what we see now. In my opinion as well, I also think that even this younger generation, they're yearning for a different kind of learning. Because it's not just a Nigerian thing, it's India, America, everyone is all talking about declining education, but at the same time, we're also seeing a lot of innovations. On the backdrop of that, you're seeing a lot of innovations coming even from the younger generation. So what it tells me is, I think there is a global apathy to the traditional standards of education or the traditional modes of education. However, there is no apathy to learning. So it means, therefore, that our R&D people, scientists, researchers, sociologists really go back to the drawing board to begin to understand what really are they looking for, what are they yearning for. And yeah.
There's no, as you said, there's no apathy to tradition. There's apathy towards the traditional modes of education. But there's room for innovation.
Yes.
The curriculum has been, as we've had it in Nigeria, seem to be, as they would say, obsolete.
Exactly.
So, moving forward, how would the parents, how would the society work with an obsolete curriculum? As assuming everybody wakes up now, okay, let's get down to it and move this thing. But you said we shouldn't put it all on the government. So, how would you expect the family, how do you expect the society to work with an obsolete curriculum to get the our education level to where it ought to be?
Okay. Very good question, and I think that brings us to one of the arms I've mentioned. What I wanted to say, what I'd said, is a shared responsibility. But now coming to your question, yes, governance. And I actually believe this is the time when we should get it right the most, because we're in a participatory governance style, which is democracy. So meaning, again, it should be everybody around the table, all the stakeholders around the table. Curriculum is very critical. Yes, we all know the issues about our curriculum. They're obsolete. They're not adapting to the new ways of learning, the new modes of learning. So definitely that needs to be looked into. Textbooks, I don't know what textbooks, are being used right now. What I see my wards, I see my kids. You give them textbooks. You buy textbooks at the beginning of the semester or the beginning of the term in their case, and you ask them, so this textbook, well, what part of the textbook are you in? And there are things like, our teacher doesn't really use the textbook. The textbook is for us to read and make notes. And then you have parallel notes. You read and make notes from your textbook. You have note taking, and then there's the notes that the teacher gives you from the board,
which sometimes doesn't even tell you what you have made from the textbook.
Which doesn't tell you. I mean, the way we were taught, you will know that you are doing algebra chapter 5. You bring your textbook. The teacher would walk through some of the questions, equations, work it on the board, then take a few from the textbook to tell you. So textbooks, what's the role of textbooks right now? You look at teaching methods in today's learning age, where the younger kids are learning to use tablets, even from 2 years, 3 years, 1 year. You cannot use the same method of standing in front of the blackboard to teach them.
We've seen some, governments begin to think in that particular direction. One of the things you said that struck me was that this is a societal failure. I remember the morning myself and Nyota were debating this. We couldn't agree on who carried the largest share of responsibility. 31%, even if we're looking at, say, pass mark, between 1 and 100%, 30 or 38% doesn't begin to cut a pass mark. You have to be talking about 50%. So that it's even around 30s, or it was in the 30s, and we're looking at a drop. It seems like a non-issue. There is a major crisis that up to 50% of students who write it, or people who write it, up to 50% of them don't pass. The question will be, who should take the bulk of responsibility for this?
Well, very good question again. I think number one, of course, the bulk of it will stay at the feet of the government. Now, when you mean government, because the government is a sum representation of the entire society. In government, you have parents. In government, you have the teachers. In government, you have the policy writers, the policy implementers, or the teachers as civil servants and what have you. So the majority of the buck will stop at the table of the government. But I think part of it as well is the fact that you then also come to the parents. Or before I come to parents, you see, what we need to also understand, again, it's about the fact that the K-17 or K-18 that we're talking about, which is those who write senior secondary examinations, that's actually the most important level of education. Your primary school, and in fact, I dare say your elementary school, primary school, and then your secondary school, they're the foundations. UNESCO says 9 years UBEC, which is your universal basic, 6 years primary, 3 years junior secondary. This is your foundation. Now, when you look at it from the government perspective, that is being, from number one, federal, for example, the federal government has abrogated all that to the state government, and they focus just on tertiary. So there needs to be some rework on that, because in the days of unity schools as federal schools, we know what, we were all products of unity schools. We didn't go to a private secondary school. That's one. The second thing about that, then, even with the state government, we've got to also understand that this level of education that has been handed down to you, it's very important. Because if you don't have the right foundation, then there's little wonder why our graduates cannot read, they cannot write, they cannot speak good English, because it's not the job of the lecturer in the university to teach you how to put grammar together. It's actually the job, it should have been the job of your primary school teachers and your secondary school teachers. Now, these are the level of education that the government has basically neglected. You come to your teachers, how do you recruit the teachers? When you then talk about, okay, where do you get the quality of teachers that you recruit? Because you see, the problem you're having, we've been having the past 10 years where you've had 18%, now you're talking about 38%, not even yet up to the scratch of a normal passing rate of 50%. It's because you cannot give what you don't have. The teachers who are in there right now are also a product of a faulty educational system.